Hey everybody, welcome to the very first episode of Justin reviewing something by himself. What should we call this segment? Justin Reviews? Is that too simple? I don't know. But anyways, we're here live from the man cave. It's a work in progress, but I'm getting it set up. I don't know if you can see too well, but I got some props with me. Got my Spider-Man, and I'm pretty sure I've showed off on camera. Got my Wolverine. These are just essentials for the story that I'm reviewing. And if you've noticed in the background, you may see what I am reviewing. This is what I'm hoping will be a 12-part series, and it's going to be on Secret Wars. So, Secret Wars is one of my favorite stories of all time, if not my favorite story. I mean, if you know any background about Secret Wars, you may have heard that it was sort of invented to sell toys, or that it's just a very simple story, a very simple premise, just to get people excited and sell books.
Oh, that's not so much.
None of that bothers me. None of that bothers me at all, especially if you actually read the story. But anyways, long story short, I grew up hearing about Secret Wars through some of my older comics, and especially from the Spider-Man TV show from the 90s, if you were fans of that and watched that. So I loved the version of Secret Wars that I saw in the Spider-Man show, and it's always made me want to read the real thing. So in 2013, this was back before I really had access to any comics. I only ever ordered my comic books off of milehighcomics.com, if you're familiar with them. That's the way as a child, that's pretty much the only way I could get comic books. Every now and then I would look out, and like my grandma would find some comic books at an auction or something and give those to me. But really for the Marvel books that I really wanted to read, I had to turn to ordering online when I could save up money, and it was few and far between when I could actually order. So in the year 2013, by this point I was in college and working a job, I downloaded the Marvel app, and that just opened up a new world to me. And I actually downloaded all 12 books of Secret Wars, and I downloaded them and I read them digitally. That's not the way I prefer to read, but sometimes that's the only way you can read. And so that is the original way I read Secret Wars 7 years ago. Now, 2018 in, I want to say, Gamers Haven, I actually found most of Secret Wars. Of course not the big book, Secret Wars number 8. I did not find that there. I do have the entire run. I got number 8 at FarleyCon, if you've seen that video. But most of them I got from Gamers Haven for really cheap, and a few of them I believe I got from Fantasy Factory. But enough backstory. I just want to dive into the story, and I want to review the first book. The next few videos won't be so long-winded, at least for the intro anyways. So I've written down some details so I wouldn't forget. I want to try and get this right and do a good job with this. So Secret Wars number 1, the writer was Jim Shooter, and if you know much about Jim Shooter, he was somewhat of a controversial guy, but a lot of his projects just kind of turned to gold. I mean, he had that sort of it factor, but he also came with some controversy. You have Michael Zeck, who is the penciler, and Christy, I want to say it looks like it's Shield, who's the colorist. I just wanted to mention those 3 names because that's mainly what you see and who you're hearing from, although there are, of course, others. But so the first book, it doesn't waste a whole lot of time with backstory. I think it takes the reader and it says, you're going to figure this out along with the heroes and villains, because they don't explain why anyone's there. You just sort of are left to figure it out with the people who are there. So what happens is that all of a sudden several heroes from the Earth are just poof transported to what looks like the vacuum of space, and a little kind of, it's like a space station sort of looking thing. And across from them there's another. So everybody who has shown up in these vessels have no clue why they're there. Now, what you as the reader quickly put together is that in this vessel you have all good guys or heroes. What you have in the other vessel are considered villains. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the roster really quick because I think this might be a very big draw for some people. Sorry, checking the time. All right, so on the good team, we have the Avengers. We have Wasp, who I believe at this time is actually the leader, which is pretty neat. She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, a different version of Captain Marvel, Captain America, Thor, Hawkeye. I wrote Captain America twice. There's only one there. And Iron Man, who I know something about, but I'm not going to reveal yet. You have the X-Men, Professor X, Storm, Nightcrawler, Rogue, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Colossus. There's also a character named Lockheed the Dragon. Not really familiar with that character, I will admit. Also, just kind of some wild card, really popular characters. You have the Hulk, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, minus Susan. I think she's pregnant at this time, and I guess that's the way she was written out of the story. And interestingly enough, with the heroes, Magneto actually spawns there with them. On the villain side, it's a very interesting collection. They're not as grouped together as the good side, like Avengers, X-Men. On the bad side, you just have some randoms, but it's great though. You have Enchantress, who I believe is a Thor villain. You have Ultron, so I'm sure most people are familiar with him. You have the Absorbing Man, which I'll admit, and I've read this before, but Absorbing Man just doesn't stand out in my mind. I can't remember much about him. You have the Wrecker and his wrecking crew, Thunderball, Piledriver, and Bulldozer. Don't really know anything about them. But then it gets to some really interesting ones after that. I'd say Ultron, Enchantress, those are really neat. But then you have Kang the Conqueror, Galactus, Lizard, and Dr. Octopus, which I'll admit are like super low on the power scale here, but two of my favorite villains ever because I'm a Spider-Man guy. Then you have Molecule Man, who, between him and Galactus, are just super hacked, super powerful, crazy. And you have Doctor Doom, who absolutely shines for this series, but we'll get to that as we go. These rosters are incredible. This may have been formed to sell toys originally. That is entirely possible. But who's going to complain about this roster? The reason I took the time to mention them is because some people may not want to read if the Avengers consist of like what looks like a B team. Some people may not be interested if all the bad guys are just kind of throwaway Captain America villains that no one's ever heard of.
Hey, let's calm it down. Let's calm it down.
To be honest, I don't know if any of those actually are Captain America villains. There's a few I've rarely ever heard of. But anyways, the rosters are really neat. I think it's interesting that Magneto is on the good team. But just to give you a quick overview, everybody's confused, but they quickly put two and two together. They've sort of been grouped together as good people. They've kind of been grouped together as supervillains. And so there's not a lot of interaction. They're both just kind of figuring out their own sides. We realize there's some sort of figure named the Beyonder who you don't really see and is very mysterious. Hasn't even really explained what everybody's doing here, but they find themselves surrounded by this alien technology that's at their disposal. You sort of immediately have some butting of heads. Wolverine's kind of a jerk in issue 1, which I'm fine with. That's true to his character. Spider-Man doesn't say much. Wasp sort of defers leadership to Captain America. Reed Richards turns down leadership. Hulk, who actually has the mind of Bruce Banner in this story, turns down leadership. So Captain America is the leader. That's probably not a very big surprise. On the evil, I guess you could say, side, Doctor Doom seems to be the one who's most likely going to be the leader. In terms of power versus power, I mean, you've got to give the edge to the villains, even without Magneto on their side, which would just, that'd be brutal. Molecule Man and Galactus alone, I mean, Kang, my goodness, it's kind of unfair if they were just fighting right now. But there's some butting of the heads. The X-Men and Avengers sort of get into it a little bit. You have people coming after Magneto saying he's a murderer. What's he doing on our side? And Magneto saying, I've never murdered an innocent. I've only ever murdered people who struck at me first, which I think is kind of a funny argument, but that is what it is. So that leads to some clashing. Galactus is the only one here who, he probably doesn't know what's going on, but he recognizes the Beyonder. And he basically does this monologue where he's saying the Beyonder can cure my insatiable hunger. And Galactus just starts flying to a certain point in space where the Beyonder, there's sort of an opening where the Beyonder's got this light shining through. And so Galactus charges it and he says, I will not be denied. I need this. You're the only one who can help me. And the Beyonder's basically saying, get away. And Doctor Doom sees this as a way to get extra power, because what I've learned from reading Secret Wars is that Doctor Doom just has a thirst for power. He really, really wants it. So Doctor Doom flies right behind Galactus. Well, the Beyonder, you don't even really exactly see how it happens. I mean, it's just like swatting a fly. I want to say they even made a reference to swatting a fly. And before you know it, Galactus and Doctor Doom laying in the dirt. Doctor Doom gets up because he was sort of behind Galactus and sort of avoided it. He just couldn't follow anymore, I guess, and probably got hit by Galactus or something. Galactus is kind of knocked out for the moment. That's what you call nerfing him for the for the story at the moment. So he's sort of out of the picture temporarily. Doctor Doom gets up and realizes we're dealing with something crazy here. And so sort of at the end there, and the villains have had their back and forth too amongst each other, but the comic gets close to an end when, Doctor Doom comes back. Dr. Octopus says, hey, you're going to be our leader. And then the book finally ends after the little conflicts are either resolved or everybody butts heads. I mean, Doctor Doom does come looking for Reed Richards because he thinks Reed Richards may be the only one who can understand, along with him, sort of what sort of situation they're in, which I think is neat. It's almost like familiarity overrules allegiance in this situation. The X-Men and Magneto stood up for each other. Doctor Doom seeks out Reed Richards, so I just find that interesting. But at the end of the day, Doctor Doom says basically he gets slighted a little bit by showing up on the hero side, and basically as soon as he gets there, he's ticked off. I'm pretty sure Kang actually shot Doctor Doom's little spaceship down. There's this alien tech all around, and so there's a lot of this back and forth and a lot of details. But the story ends with Doctor Doom is, I think, standing with the hero side, who are kind of disjointed, and the book ends with the villains showing up, basically doing a full-on rampage, like coming towards them. So very interesting in book one. I probably should have said spoiler warning at the beginning of this. My thoughts are that I love it. I think it's awesome. I'm okay with no explanation. I'm good with just jumping right in the action. There is a lot of dialogue, which is understandable. And I think book two sets up to be a lot more action-packed than comic number one. But it is a really good start. I think it definitely sets up for a lot of good stuff that's coming in the next 11 issues. And so could not recommend this more. It's one of my favorite stories of all time, and I look forward to reviewing the rest for you guys. Thanks. Bye.